Even within the queer community, we have different experiences. So, what's the economic state of the transgender community today?
You're listening to Queer Money episode number 528, and today we're joined by the transcapitalist Kenneth Davis. Kenneth is a proud Black transgender Forbes list entrepreneur, financial literacy advocate, and certified data scientist. He has a passion for educating and empowering the LGBTQ plus community. He dedicates himself to dismantling systemic poverty and economic discrimination, challenging outdated norms to make relevant for future generations.
Without further ado, let's get on with the show.
Capital One Auto Navigator does more than just auto financing. We're here to help you find a car you love, too. Shop millions of cars from thousands of dealers nationwide. Research your favorite makes and models. Explore dealers near you and more. All on Auto Navigator.
Well, welcome to the Queer Money Podcast, Kenneth Davis, aka the Transcapitalist. We're excited to have you on the show.
Hey, thank you for having me. So happy to be here.
Definitely. You know, honestly, I think that we have interacted with each other on social media for probably a good 3 or 4 years now, and we've talked about having you on the podcast, and it's just like this has been this slow march of finally getting you on the podcast. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for being patient. Like when y'all first reached out, to be honest, like I was just starting to get some momentum with the Transcapitalist. So, and that was first time entrepreneur. So everything was just like so new to me. And when y'all reached out, I'm just like, people are reaching out now. My wife's like, yes, you have something good. And I'm just like, oh, all right, let me just try to continue to build it.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, was it last year that you were highlighted in Forbes as a personal finance expert?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then also made Next Advisors, Times Next Advisors list as well in 2022, I believe. So
very cool.
We're getting there.
Yeah.
We're good.
It's a slow march, but yeah, you're getting there.
Definitely. And you have kind of I guess, for lack of a better way to say this, kind of taken up the ownership of being the person in the trans community talking to folks about personal finance, right? Because there just isn't the visibility that we see of very many other trans or non-binary folks out there in the personal finance space.
Oh, most definitely. And then even on top of that, adding that to be a person of color, speaking about finances in that capacity has been mind blowing. Sometimes it can get lonely of just being like, oh, it's just me.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing other people or other financial gurus because, as y'all know, sometimes it can get saturated.
Yeah.
Or even sometimes you just see like, are we talking about the real topics? Like, what's going on here? So for me to do that for the transgender community, to be at that seat at that table, it's an honor, and I'm proud to be there to do it.
Yeah,
definitely. Well, congratulations for all the success.
Yeah, we appreciate it. And, to be honest, of course, going back to our origin story in 2015 of kind of having that aha moment of, holy shit, there is nobody out there talking to the LGBT community about personal finance. This just, to a certain degree, it's kind of like it gets you excited because, you have this opportunity, but also at the second you think about it, all of a sudden there's like this weight on your shoulders of, I'm the only one, or there's so few of us. And I'm very thankful that other queer people have come into this space. I think it's part of the reason why when John and I worked with the Motley Fool in 2022 and 2023, we said we have to include trans and non-binary folks in this survey because so often they get left out. It's all just about the L's and the G's. And we're like, we got to include other people because even when, the LGBT community is this little tiny sliver in the data that other surveys do, we oftentimes disappear, or various groups within our community disappear.
Yeah, and thank you for doing that. And always thank you for thinking of me and sending out the invite to say like, hey, we need to have this introduction and put Kenneth in there because he definitely has something to say because sometimes it's hard advocating for the transgender community because we're just so busy fighting other systematic things in places, or honestly, we are just trying to survive this, especially this volatile climate, especially with all the anti-trans bills going out there, just even from a financial perspective, it's hard out there for us. A lot of people don't recognize that. Of course, I am appreciative that more people are coming out and identifying as transgender, which has been beautiful and great. But just getting down to our environment, a lot of people don't think about us in that capacity as others. So it's just like, you're just trying to survive. So are we.
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely.
What has been the reception from the trans community about your work?
So I love it since I come out with the trans capitalist. They're always taken aback. And I did that on purpose. And I did that on purpose because I wanted to spark that conversation about finance, because we rarely talk about it. Because it's just like we have that natural society taboo of like, you can't speak about finances in public. So I'm going to continue to do what I was taught to do of not speaking about it, because sometimes as transgender people, we become small just trying to fit in. So we don't want to agitate or shake anything. And we always consider our safety number one priority. But for me, it was just like, oh no, since America is on a capitalistic economic system, I was just like, technically, we're all capitalists by default. And I know people don't cancel me yet. Just hear me out. That since it is by default, it's just like, okay, at the end of the day, we have to learn this system. And so for me, I was just like, okay, so I'm a transgender capitalist, but I'm going to teach you how to defend yourself against capitalism. And that's the key and the switch that I tell people, because instead of just conforming to the economic system, it's just like, no, let's learn what these rules are, how they think, what's in place, why are these policies in place? And then when you know the rules of the game, you actually have a chance to win. So for me, it's just like when I'm doing that, it sparks that conversation to talk about finances. And then I instantly have them on board. And they're like, I never thought about my finances in that capacity. Like, I never thought I can win the system. I can beat the system, because everybody's like, if you're tired of being oppressed, you want that freedom, right? So for me, it feels like I'm giving them that freedom to do so.
I'm curious too. Dave and I have similar, frustrations with the LGBTQ community as a whole, kind of avoiding the topic of finance, because we do have so many other things on our plate. It seems like, but it almost seems to us in a way like if you're fiscally secure or you're living in a world of abundance, then you have much more. I don't want to use ammunition, tools in your belt to be able to not only protect yourself, but protect the community. It's almost like we should take personal finance as important as we take anything else that we're dealing with in the community. What are your thoughts?
So we definitely should, but believe it or not, even when people are fiscally set, they don't have the proper strategies to really maximize that freedom and that fiscal responsibility they have. So it's like they're kind of like on autopilot. Like, so I had clients who can bring in like 20,000, 50,000, like $100,000 worth of money. And then sometimes they just have trouble holding on to it, or they don't know exactly what to do with this. So you're thinking like, yeah, you have all this at your disposal, so you can do so much. And especially these are like LGBTQ people that my clients majority are, like 99% are. It's just like, they just don't know. And so it's like that carry principle. Like when you know better, you do better. So it's for me to reach out to them and like spark that idea to say like, hey, did you know like maxing out your IRA Roth will get you like this X amount of money by retirement? And then even before you do that, did you know like if you just save like $200 a week, you can put this aside for that? And then they're just like, oh, I can like help other people. And what I also appreciate in the transgender community, since we're so like community oriented and want to take care of our own, that we always usually set aside like giving funds. So when another trans person is in trouble, they have that money to like, oh, I can't pay my bill this month. I already set aside money for you to do that, and then teach you the financial knowledge that I pass on to them
Right.
to say like, hey, you can do this. And then those small actions lead up to steps where they'll actually start taking their finances more seriously. Because what I learned
Nice.
is also too, especially in our community, we don't think we can. And we're just so stuck thinking and believing that like we just made it. So let's not rock the boat and push anymore from emotional and mental health level with our finances to even do that, because there's so much like mental health and financial blocks. And that's why I always say like one of my pillars is healing financial trauma, because when you learn how to heal that, you see the world in a different perspective that gives you more options and more freedom and opportunities to do something, to say, okay, I am important. So now my finances are important too. And
Right.
sometimes we forget that link.
100%.
So there's a lot of the, for I guess for lack of a better way of saying it, with what you just were talking about, there's a lot of psychology behind all of that money, the psychology of how we interact with money and our money stories and all of that. And we know, and our listeners know, John and I preach this all the time, that personal side of personal finance is so important to understand our money story. Let's talk a little bit about what the state of the trans community is. And maybe you could also elaborate on where you think is happened or happening with the community over the last, say, 5 to 10 years that kind of have an impact on that kind of mental state of how we think about money, or how it affects our money story.
With no fees or minimums and no overdraft fees, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/bank for details. Capital One, N.A., member FDIC.
I love that. I, oh, it's so much. And it's exciting to see the transformation, because I would say 5 years ago, it was all about survival and being quiet, and not even like, or being stealth, a term that we like to use for people who are not familiar with transgender language, as stealth just meaning that you are transitioning, but people cannot tell that you are transgender. So it's just like, I'm not going to say anything or do anything to let people know what my gender identity is and what my state is. And then let alone let the personal finance story link to that together. But then as a lot of people are coming out more and starting to see there's others that look just like them. And this is why I want to say, especially for the transgender community, social media has been a very big influence for us, because it allowed a safe space for us to show one another that we are visible without the interaction of feeling like we're not safe, of meeting in person, or like being in a space where like you can meet up and somebody can threat harm to us. Because like when I transitioned in 2011, like you didn't, it was like the blind leading the blind of fighting other people. And then let alone, mind you, without that, you didn't see how can I put this? You didn't see a positive example of a transgender person. You only heard what society would say. And that means that you're living in poverty, you're homeless, you do not have any education because you were kicked out and disowned probably by the average age of 15 on high school. So you probably even get a high school degree, let alone a GED. And we all know in the financial world that will limit your job options tremendously. And that's why majority of transgender people did rely on sex work and to get money and to get resources for themselves if there wasn't like nonprofit organizations out there to help you. And mind you, this was still 8 to 5 years ago. So that was big within itself. But then when you had social media, you're starting to see positive examples of other trans people saying that you wanted more for yourself. That was where you had the increased possibility of going to school to get an education to finish that. Even with my personal story, I was kicked out and disowned when I hit my first year of college, and I had to make that decision to stay in college, do the college loan debt, or go back to the streets. And I chose the debt because I just knew like I wanted to make something of myself. But when around that time social media blew up, you saw those positive examples, and then it led you to more education. So yes, you took on the college debt, but you were also able to get a degree. But mind you, this was still maybe people who actually had degrees was probably around 15% of the transgender population. So it's just that restrictiveness of your options and availability of what you're able to do, and then financially what you can actually obtain, because a lot of people do not understand that the unemployment rate for Black or people of color who are trans is 4 times higher than the national average. So it's just like those options are being limited. So now, fast forwarding with the help of social media and seeing positive examples, you're able to go to school. Then also us advocating for ourselves and not taking it of just being discriminated against, but now actually, because we all know what happens is somebody gets discriminated on social media, it blows up, it goes viral, it like people are talking about it, people are learning the stories, and then policies are getting created, policies are starting to change. So a lot of people think like cancellation can be crazy, but sometimes that's the only tools that we have. And but those tools have helped us advance our community like beyond years, instead of just being quiet and stealth and in the closet.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. We posted something on social media yesterday, and all the haters are jumping on it, and I don't think they realize like as much as they're making it go viral for us, so it's just reaching more
Exactly.
people, and the people
Yeah,
that don't hate it are just like liking it and they're being quiet about it. It's just the haters who are commenting. So like, all right, thanks, you're giving us free PR.
Yeah,
exactly.
there have been a couple of defensive comments, but I do like this idea you're talking about. At least I think that this is what you're kind of talking about, is that social media has made the community more visible, not only to each other but to everyone else. Um,
Yes.
do you think that is in part what has led to the climate that we're seeing right now, with all of these policies and bills that are being proposed against the trans community? Do you think that the visibility is I'm not saying that the community should go back in the closet, but I think that I'm wondering if the result of the visibility is the anger that we're seeing from the far right, especially the Christian far right, and they're just going to have to deal with it because we're not going to go back in the closet.
Yeah. No. So I agree that the visibility, like, well, first, every action has a consequence, right? But for this one, it's the attitude and the psychology behind it that's making the far right like go crazy, because it's just like, especially with the new generation, it's like you're not going to tell me who I am, who can identify, who I'm going to be, and who I'm going to love, right? Because then you're going to get another viral post of somebody saying like, no, this person just told me I can't be who I am. Are you crazy right now? Like, what's going on? So I feel like it's having that attitude with it, because we're not scared. I would say, like, in the community, we understand what's going on, but we're speaking up because we're tired of being picked on for so long. We're tired of being considered the little person. And then also another thing within the community, since we're so tired of thinking like, okay, well, it's the transgender community, they're always in poverty, they always have homelessness. Like, no, that's not our story. And we get so upset when people say that, because then it's just like you can see so many successful businesses, so many successful influencers, so many successful celebrities, writers, actresses, actors. Like, you see us thriving now. And I feel like that's what makes them more upset, because it's like, in spite of all the hate and backlash that we receive, we're still pushing forward like nothing. Like,
Yeah.
you can still hate on us, but we do not care. And now we're translating it to see, especially in America, that money does speak. And that now we're seeing like, okay, when I gain the money and have the stableness and have the financial literacy behind it, you really can't tell me nothing. And it's like, America, you did this. Because remember, you were founded on business. And now that when you see transgender businesses, LGBTQ businesses, it's like you can't stop that entrepreneur from making, like, there's no cap on it. It's not like we're in corporate America and we have to wait for a promotion. It's like you see the business that you built and how far you're going and how far you're being recognized. And now the transgender community just realize, oh, we have that same power.
Yeah,
We can do it too.
I think that's the thing that John and I just are always we always have in the back of our mind when we're having these kinds of conversations, not only with people in the community but people outside of the community. That as a community, the stronger we are personally, individuals, the stronger we are when it comes to our own personal finances, our own financial situation, when we move from sustainability to above being sustainable, to actually having money to use in worthwhile ways, it is so empowering. There are
Yes.
so many things that we can do with it if we choose, especially when I think about safety and where we choose to live and all of those kinds of things. Money is a tool that is more than just for brunches and for the designer clothes and for the nice
Hmm.
cars and the trips. The money is at the beginning is for our safety and is for our mental health and literally our physical strength in some situations, right? That is so important. You shared some really good data with us, and we really appreciate this. In preparing for this interview, you shared some really good data with us. And one of the things that kind of always surprises us, especially I think when we hear this kind of uh, John and I have been referring to them recently as the gala gays, because the gala gays tell you can only live in California and New York and
Oh yeah,
Seattle
yeah.
and and ew, you live in Indianapolis, or ew, you live in
Somebody on social media called them the gay listers, but the A was a capital.
yeah. But you shared some data, and we were really surprised to see where it is that trans people are living in the country. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, and maybe why that might be the case, or some? We'll share some anecdotes maybe around that.
Yeah, I would love to. So surprisingly with that, and even when I was reading the data too, I was just like, oh, really? So it shows that 41% of the transgender community resides in the South. And then when y'all shared that article with me, it just like even solidified it too, that it's just like there is a lot of us in these red states, and we're actually creating our communities, self-sustaining communities, to support ourselves in order to continue to live out the life that we choose to and the truth that we want to be in. And so it's just like kind of a migration pattern that I have noticed too personally, and through the data, is that it's just like you identify as transgender, you realize like, okay, this is who I am. So you're just like, let me travel out to the big cities to medically transition. And then it's like once you get those resources, because usually in the bigger cities like New York and LA, like you have more access to gender affirming healthcare for free, as like you have other nonprofit organizations that will sponsor you and stuff like that, that will give you your gender affirming hormones and stuff like that. And then it's like once you got your rhythm of what you need to do in the life you choose to be, it's just like, why am I staying in this expensive city? Like, I miss home. Like, I want to go back. And then also from a financial perspective, living in the South, 'cause like my family's from South Carolina as well, the cost of living is just so much lower. And it's like you can get more bang for your buck. But of course, like everything, there is a consequence to every action, or like there's both sides to the story. It's just like, okay, it's cheaper to stay here. My family's here. I'm from here. I want to return back home. But I still have to fight these anti trans policies. And while that's happening, it's also letting us know to them to say, like, we're not going anywhere as well. Because it's said that, especially even with the data too, that I believe it's 7% of people actually know a transgender person. So 7% is a low number
Yes.
to know this, even though within the world there's 1.4 million of us and growing. So it's just like if we continue to leave these red states, they're just going to completely take over. And it's not going to be fair for those who cannot or do not have the opportunity or the resources to leave those states as well. So it's just like we're not running scared, but we want to be home. We want to be with the family who loves us, who accept us, and it's easier on our pockets.
Yeah.
So it's just like, let's do this. And so I give people who are in the South, my community, salute.
Yeah.
Stay there. I love it.
So it's so interesting that you say that. We had somebody on one of our social media posts. I can't remember which one. But there was a whole thread of people saying, "Oh, you can't live there. Queer people can't live there." I'm sure it was probably a red state. And somebody commented like, "When did the LGBT community become so soft? When did we built the Castro? We built Hell's Kitchen.
Yes.
We built some of the. It was called Boys Town. I think it's changed the name Halstead. We built these places that weren't inviting to begin with, but we could make them our own. We could thrive there. And suddenly, 20, 30 years later, a lot of people are rich because that's where they started. So when did we become so soft? So I wonder if it's really more of the L's and the G's that have become soft.
Maybe. Yeah,
Mm.
maybe.
And they need to check their privilege because it sounds
Yeah.
like, at least from your perspective, and I know you can't speak for the whole trans community, but you are the trans capitalist, so you've kind of taken that mantle. So it just seems like there's a little bit more gumption behind the trans community to say, we're going to stay here. This is our home. This is where we're from, or this is where we're going to be able to thrive more so than maybe New York or LA.
Yeah, correct. And it's just, I'm glad you brought that point because it reminds me of Martha B. Johnson because it's like she was in New York and she fought back and she was like a black transgender woman. It was just like, I'm not going to take this anymore.
Yeah.
And then the whole Stonewall rights. And it's just like, and that's why we have the gay capital of New York because of her. So it's just like, yeah, we're not leaving.
Nice.
It's definitely interesting to have these kinds of conversations. I liked the idea that you kind of alluded to this. It almost seemed to me like college. Kids go away from home to learn, to get an education, and oftentimes, I don't want to say always, but a lot of times they end up going back to their home state, right? Because mom and dad or family are there, or maybe they know that they have a job there, or whatever the case may be. But you kind of alluded to this idea that that's what some trans folks are doing is that when they're ready to make the major medical portions of their transition, they're going where they can get access to the services that they need. And I think that's all of us, right? If we need to go to the hospital, we're going to try to find the best in the nearest hospital. I hear the conversation in retirement for the LGBT community right now. A lot of the conversation is, will I be be close enough to the kinds of care, physical care, the health care that I need? What cities, right? We just talked with somebody in Palm Springs a couple weeks ago, and they're like, healthcare in Palm Springs is shit. It's really bad. They said, you have to, so oftentimes if you're going to see a specialist, you're driving to LA or you're driving to other parts of the state because healthcare is so poor there in the state. And you have to wait there are long waits for all sorts of services and stuff like that. And that's one of the meccas, right? We always say, oh, Palm Springs is the gay place that's where we all got to go. But I think we do have to look at what's important for our lives. Where can we thrive? And we need to maybe adjust this narrative that it is possible for LGBTQ folks to thrive physically and financially and emotionally in places that aren't necessarily considered the gay meccas or the queer meccas.
Yes, absolutely. And it's just like that point of like when you create your own community, like, or even to go deeper, it's like once you learn about a transgender person and you realize like they're just a regular person just like you, it changes the game. And for a lot of people and a lot of family members that are able to help you, because especially from a financial perspective, if you think about like when you're kicked out, disowned early, you cut off so many resources financially for like that first loan or that first cosigner or like that first person to teach you about a credit card, how to properly use it. And it's like you don't have that access. But when you're home with your family, those resources kick back in to say, like, okay, I see that you're working hard. Let me help you get this car. I see that you're working hard. Let me help you get this apartment. Like I see that you're applying to multiple jobs. I know that I can like give you that push and that bump to get it. And it's through that community to do so. And maybe if it's not your actual family, then you have the chosen family that we depend on. It's just like how many people who are actually lesbian and gay too that reach out to the transgender community be like, oh, I see that you're doing this. Let me help you. And it doesn't even have to be financially. It's just like that encouragement, that talk, that community, that advice, that old sage wise advice of just saying like, don't get that credit card right now. Actually do this. And that goes so much longer, like giving that transgender person like so much encouragement because especially in the transgender community and like trigger warning, like the suicide rates are so high. And a lot of people are actually realizing that now, and they're just like, well, you're fighting so hard to be the person you are, like, why is the suicide rate so high? Like, I'm not understanding. And then when you actually have that conversation to say, like, well, it's not accepting to other people and there's no hope and there's no resources, like, what are we doing? And then that's when they realize, like, is my hate that so much for it that I'm causing this person to unalive themselves? And it's just like, no. And that changes the perspective too. And that gives more hope and that gives more chance and that gives more fight. And that's what I love about my community the most. And that's even why I chose not to be stealth anymore. Because mind you, like, even from a financial perspective, being born as a female and going to college, and I didn't transition until like a little bit after college, but when I was getting an engineering job, I was paid significantly lower than when I was stealth and being as a man, I got paid so much higher. I was just like, oh, this is real. And when I was able to tell my friends, family, and all that other stuff, like these things actually exist, like the wage gap, it blew their mind and they
Mhm.
became more interested and they wanted to help and they wanted to change their perspective and they wanted to speak to others. And that, like, and that's just knowing one transgender person. Like, a lot of people understand, like, when you talk and have these conversations, it runs deep.
Yeah, I love that because I think that we hear the slogan used a lot, visibility matters, but I think that your point here of the stories are what takes that matter and turns it into meaning for people
Yes.
who need it to be meaningful to them, right? Whether that's a parent or a sibling or the next door neighbor who now understands a little bit more about your story, about why you're facing the challenges that you are, then they understand about why those challenges exist and maybe they themselves have the opportunity to do something to alleviate some of those challenges, whether
Yes.
it's for the whole community or just someone else they know. And I think I think that is what it is so important. You brought up this idea of education. You've talked about your own education and how you delayed transition to get your education. Um, do you think that that a lack of education is one of the leading reasons why we see uh, um, wage discrimination or lack of income within the trans community?
I would definitely say first it's lack of income and then lack of education next. Just because, like, even not everybody wants to go to college, not college is not for everybody, but still within America, like, you need income, a source of income to help you to live out the goals that you have for yourself, the dreams, your purpose, and stuff like that. So in the transgender community, our sources of income are always severely limited. And especially for non binary transgender people, because it's just like I always used to say and still say this is like the HR, as much as they're there to help you, they're gatekeepers. And let's keep it 100. Like, if you have a transgender male who identifies as transgender but is wearing a dress and lipstick, 9 out of 10, they're not going to get that job, even though they are highly qualified for it. Versus somebody else who just came out of school who is just a cisgender person, somebody who's not trans, to get that job and it's just like has that courage to apply for it, they're going to get that job and they're going to show that they're not even deserving of that job. So it's just like that gatekeeping right then and there cuts out our sources of income. And then it's just like, well, if we're trying to get more sources of income, why would I even default to education? Because now I'm just adding more debt to myself. I don't
Yeah.
have time for that. I don't have the stress for that. I'm already just panicking right now to find a place to eat, to have shelter, and somebody to love. Like, those are always our basic resources in the transgender community. And then once those at least two out of those three are filled, then we can think higher to be like, okay, let's try education in different places. But
Mhm.
until like the gatekeeping stops, and a lot of people can still say like, well, you can still work for yourself, you can do freelancing. We do that, but then that's where the lack of education comes in, because now it's just like we have the opportunity to bypass the income. Now we're making our own income. And that's why I do work with a lot of trans businesses and even LGBT businesses where they don't know how to maximize their revenue or their profit margins and stuff like that because they don't have that education to do so.
It's I'm having a little bit of a brain fart here. I'm going to have to take a pause. I just lost what I was going to say. We're going to have to cut this one.
That's why it's so smoky in here.
Yeah, right.
Yours got stuck.
I was going to ask you something, and then you said something, and I forgot.
Well, I have a question if I can go.
Go right ahead. All right. This is where we're going. Thank God we have a producer. Going to put him to work on this one.
So you sent over a couple studies. One was called the A Broken Bargain for the Transgender Workers, and the other was the 2022 U.S. Transgender Survey. And I think that there's a Williams Institute study that also supports this. But there's been now a few studies at least that have showed that trans people are at least as educated and sometimes more educated than the general population. So for those who pursue an education, do you think they're getting a return on that investment? And the reason I ask this is because I think that we need to rethink education in America today, because a lot of people are going to college and not getting, trans people and otherwise, and not getting a salary commensurate with the investment that they've made. So do you think that the trans community is getting a solid ROI, or should the trans community start maybe rethinking where and how they get education?
That's a very good question. Like, I am on the fence with that one all the time because it's just like we're highly educated now. And so when you're able to get that job, and I guess that's the key point I'm trying to say, and I really want people in the world to understand, it's like, give us the opportunity to get the job. Don't discriminate us, because we face so much discrimination from jump already that's like we don't even get the chance to show you like what we can do, because then it's just like the ones who have the higher education and finally get that job, they're in those executive positions, and then that's where they're able to make the change and show like the ROI on their education. But that's a rare occurrence where, like, I can't think of the name of the stat for where it came from, but you do not see transgender people in high executive positions unless they own or built the company themselves. And that's key. Like, there's a reason for that. So that's why I say like it goes back to gatekeeping. But for the others, there are other organizations out there, and I will give a shout out to Trans Tech Social Enterprises that Angelica Ross made, because she literally has scholarship programs where she works with like Coursera and Google, where like they're giving you these certificates for free. So like I just completed one and it really works because I'm one of those people that I'm always going to test my system to see if it's really helping us or not. And then I'll give you feedback to let you know like it actually works. But this one actually does work, where like, for example, you apply to a scholarship and then you go to Coursera, and for 6 months you're working with Career Circle, another recruiter agency, where if you're trans, that you would get a choice of 6 certificates in different fields, and then you can apply for an entry level analyst position that will start you around 60K. Do you know how rare that is?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely.
We just saw an
No
article the other day
school
on
debt.
CNBC about kids are struggling to get 40K.
Yeah.
Yeah, and no school debt. So it's like it was free, no school debt, and I could start at 60K. And a lot of trans people have never seen that amount of money in their lifetime to start off with that. And it's just like, these are new ways of education that can really help our community thrive and move forward and make some great progress. But this old traditional way of going to college now is like a gamble, because now you're out there with the rest of them fighting for those same things. And then they're cutting out DEI, like they're cutting out all these other programs that can help you. Oh, affirmative action, they cut that out. So it's just like, what do we have? And then when we're face to face with somebody, we're not passable, and passable means that another person can't tell if you're trans. If you're passable in the trans community, you have a higher chance of getting that job, but then you have to be stealth.
Yeah.
Or you have to wait till you sign that contract work,
Before you come out.
and then you can come out and be like, yeah, I'm trans. But then you can get a hostile work environment because then they're
Right.
going to be upset, like you tricked me. And it's just like, we're not triggers. Like, we're just people trying to get in any way that we can fit in so we can survive for ourselves.
Yeah, I think it was this is the brain fart I had. For those of you who are listening, we cut that out of the podcast. But when you were talking about this earlier, this idea of gatekeeping, there was, I think it was the University of Surrey did a study over several years and found that hiring managers, or I'm sorry, recruiters, hiring managers and managers who could promote individuals were much more likely to either hold someone back or not give someone a job the further away they were from the gender binaries spectrum, right? So the further away you are from passing, and it doesn't matter whether you are a queer person or not. If you're a straight person and you just happen to have, for a man who has a voice that's a little bit higher or a woman who has a voice that's a little bit lower, those individuals are getting denied jobs because of this. And they did this study for a couple of years and found that that was the case. So, it's you talk about this whole gatekeeping thing. It's so easy to see how you can have all this excitement in your life and be thinking that you're moving forward in a positive direction and you're doing all this thing, you're getting education, you've got your family backing you, whether it's chosen or your biological family, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're hit with interview after interview after interview after interview, where as soon as they see you or they hear your voice, it's like, okay, thank you, but no thank you, if even if they're that nice, right? How
Yeah.
hard that must be. And then you may end up turning back to the income sources that you had before and going
Oh,
back to those low wages, right?
Still
The
have to pay off
things
your
that you
student loans.
can do to get by, because you go from, I mean, we all know when you get out of college, usually within 6 months, you're hit with those student loan bills and you're
yes.
desperate for money. My stepson's in this situation right now. And he, any of us who are in that situation, when you get desperate for money, you turn to the easiest access to income that you can.
Yes.
It's probably, I mean, I don't want to say this is the reason, but I can see why more trans people would turn to sex work, because if it's a easier source of income for them, then it would help alleviate some of that stress in their life by just dealing with getting the money in.
Yeah. And we're just, it's like back against the wall, just forced into different situations we do not want to be in. And it's just like, but how are we going to eat, sleep, and survive to get to the next day and repeat and rinse and repeat to do the same thing? And that's why I'm very thankful for organizations that are out there to help us. But a lot of people understand, like, when you are transgender, you have this perspective on a world, even when it comes to finances and jobs and people, that you're constantly scanning to see, are they for me? Are they accepting? Am I allowed to? So, like, even for me, job searching, even for other people that I know who are job searching, it's like, do they have affirming policies? Where are their stance on pride? What are their political stance? Can I apply to this job? Even if you get past that, being a person of color, there's a select reason why my full name is, like, when I do apply or do different jobs, is Kenneth Davis when my first name is Khalil. Like, going through that process is just like, Khalil was not getting job interviews whatsoever. As soon as I do the K dot, oh, I'm getting called back. And then not disclosing anything of that matter and to that part to say something, until when I built my own company, I was just like, you know what, I don't care. I'm going to still try it and do what I need to do. But we're just constantly scanning to see, is this a safe environment?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then can we go and prosper?
Yeah.
Right.
And you just think about all of the mental and physical energy that is expended to
Yes.
do that. And it it has to be a contributing factor to why the community is not as well off financially as other people inside the community or outside the community. When it comes to this idea of income and uh, just our overall financial well-being, and we see so much poverty in the trans community, and that's in part because of the information you've shared with us, information that we've dug up from the Williams Institute. They do a great job of reviewing and sharing this kind of information on a regular basis. Do you have any suggestions or solutions that you think would help with decreasing the amount of poverty in the trans community?
Oh, most definitely. My first one, and it worked, is just financial literacy, to be honest, because it's just like we all know, like, well, not a lot of people know this, but if you can manage $1, like properly manage that $1, you can manage 10, then you can manage 20, then 100, and then 1,000, and it just grows from there. And you're starting to see more options of what you can do with your money in whatever situation that you are actually in. And it just proves to show that it's just like I have more freedom, I have more options, and it gives you goals, it gives you motivation, and it gives you that help that you need. Because if you're just spending money and you're on autopilot, you don't know where it's going, where it's coming from. But when you're able to say, like, look, I got this $1, I'm gonna make it last. And now I'm more attentive to what I need to pay, what I need to buy, what I'm spending on. You go a lot further in the world. And so it's just like when I'm working with clients, I'm taking them from debt and now they're actually like going on vacations. Now they have their first apartment. Now they have their car. Now they have like all these things that they never knew they could with whatever job they have. Because I'm a firm believer, and especially in the finances, it doesn't matter how much you have, but it's just like, what do you have? Like, what are you starting with what you have, with what you can work with, and what it can grow into, versus saying like, oh, I need $100,000. Like when I learned that you can invest in the stock market with like 20 bucks or less, I was just like, nobody told me this. Like, wait, what? I have $20. Like I have $5 that I can put to the side. And it's just like all those options and opportunities became so clear to me after a financial literacy education. So I say that's the number one goal that a lot of transgender people need to do in order to see more freedom and opportunities of what you can do with yourself. And then definitely another solution, which y'all have been talking about, is education and the best route of education for yourself. Because that's when I learned too, and I'm seeing it within the community. It's like not every field or industry that you want to do involves college, and maybe just involves a small certificate program where that can cost you anywhere from maybe 5 to 10K. That loan is a lot cheaper than 100K bill from when you graduate, but you're still able to achieve the goal that you need. And a lot of institutions now are starting to learn that a lot of people don't care about college like they used to, or don't want that degree. But if you have like a certificate from Google, if you have a certificate from this place, you can get this job. And a lot of companies and a lot of corporations are being lax with that, which is great, to say like, hey, if you complete this certificate, I deem it valid, you can get a job here. That helps instead of going the traditional route of, okay, now I gotta go to school, now I gotta go to college, now I gotta go to grad school, now I gotta, like, no, it cuts it out. So there's like a lot of opportunities in that. So, and then like I always say, like nobody can ever take away knowledge from you. It's very empowering. Once you learn something, you will always have it forever. And then also, I'll say for my community, and I always say this, there's so much strength in rebuilding that it's okay because you're stronger and you're smarter from when you first started. So say if you got that job, but it turned out to be a hostile work environment, but one, at least you knew you can make 40K and up. At least you knew you were able to get that job. At least you knew you have skills from that job that you're able to go for another job and put that on your resume to say like, hey, I did XYZ, I completed this, I have the knowledge, I restarted, and I'm stronger than before. So those are just a few solutions that I believe work.
Love that. I love that your comment about getting that understanding of personal finance and how money works for you and how you can be empowered by money. I always kind of think of this that your current salary is actually your training wheels to you having more
Mm,
money in the future, right?
I
Eventually
like
you're
that.
going to have more money in the future, but you cannot manage that money in the future unless you know how to manage your money today, because that is what helps you grow. We all, every single one of us, whether your parents have hundreds of millions of dollars, we all need financial training wheels. We all have to learn how money
Yes.
works for us. It's just different whether
Yes.
you have $1, $100,000, or $100 million. You still have to understand how to use it, or you're going to be end up being a financial mess, right?
Yes. And I'll just say real quick too, like just from my experience being in the financial world, and that's why I say like going to business school and getting my master's in finance is one of the best educations I never regret. And that's when I was able to see people from different salary points. And just to let people out there know too, like don't let that social media or that facade fool you to be like, well, if they're a high level executive, they're making like 100K plus. Sometimes they're living paycheck to paycheck,
Yeah.
or they're in debt too because they didn't have that financial literacy education to
Yeah.
teach them how to properly use all that money at their disposal. So don't ever get discouraged. And I tell people this all the time, like, don't ever get discouraged just because like you may be starting from a lower salary. That is fine. But if you can manage and master that salary, when you get to that person's 100K, you will surpass them
Mhm.
like nobody tomorrow. So just keep that in mind. Like, I love that y'all just mentioned that. Like, yeah, you need those training wheels, and it's time to make that a priority.
Yeah, definitely. I also appreciate your conversation around alternative forms of education,
Oh, yes.
and folks, e- even if you don't qualify for one of these scholarships, for the courses on Coursera are where you can get these certificates. It's $50 a month. I know for some folks, $50 a month is a lot of money, but for a lot of us, $50 a month means I'm not going to go out this weekend. One weekend
Hmm.
of the month, I'm going to not go out, and I'm going to use that money towards my education, or I'm going to cut back on some of the things that I splurge on. Maybe it's a little bit easier for us, but those classes are the classes that are taught in many of the top universities around the country. It's the same
Yes.
teachers teaching these classes. So you can get a certificate on a class that is from UC Berkeley or is from MIT. I don't know if MIT is on there, but I know some of the top tier schools. UCLA is on there. I know that some of the top tier schools have these certificate programs that they teach through this. And if you can do that in a 6-month period and it costs you $50 a month, that's $300 that could
Yes.
eventually turn you into making like you said, $60,000 a year off the bat. It may be the best way for you to actually get started on your education. And I'm speaking specifically to a lot of the queer youth who are
Yes.
struggling financially right now, that there is a way for you. You don't have to leave your state and go to an expensive place to live and take out a bunch of student loans that are going to take you decades to pay back. Maybe the first step is just getting that first over the hump with that first little bit of education.
Oh, yeah. And Coursera does have financial aid too. Um,
Oh, they
they
do.
have
Didn't know
those.
that.
Yeah, they have financial aid scholarships. It's like a little button right next to the course when you like click enroll, and
Right.
they'll give you a percentage up off of it. So sometimes it can cost you like $30 a month, $20 a month. Like, hey, free. Like,
Wow.
let's go for it.
Yeah.
And then if you still want to go get your degree or your master's, get
That's
your employer to pay for that once you
Right.
get that
Get your
certificate or
oh
eligible
employer
job.
yes,
tuition
oh
reimbursement.
yes,
Get your employer to pay for it. That's
yes.
why I don't have any student loan debt.
That's what the song OPP was about, right?
Yeah.
Other people's money.
Yes,
Well,
exactly.
the inspiration for OPP.
Right.
That's right. Yeah, go for it. Like, hey,
Yeah.
if it's up your boat, go for it.
I have a kind of a a little bit of a sensitive question for you,
Okay.
and this is around people of color in the trans community. Oftentimes, we look at people of color in the trans community, even in the LGBT community. They're more often than not, they make up the larger portion of those who are living at the lower end of the income spectrum. And I'm just kind of curious if you think the lack of acceptance is a major driver in why we see some of this versus maybe in the white population. I'm not saying that white people are more accepting of trans people. I'm just curious if you see this as something that may be happening, is that not only are they dealing with that they're a person of color in the overall general community, but being a trans person and a person of color in their own family, are we seeing that it's more difficult for these individuals finding acceptance from their family?
Oh, well, I would definitely say it's not even like finding acceptance from their family. It's just that being a person of color, it's hard being a person of color in America. And your family always wants the best for you, especially like when you're born and things like that. They have these dreams and all these things for you because they already experienced the discrimination and the racism it is outside in the world, and they don't want that for you. And so then it's just like, okay, now you're identifying as transgender. It's not that they don't accept you, they're upset that you're adding another strike of why the world can be so harmful to you. And it's just like that anger and that passion to say, like, I don't want this hard life for you. And you're choosing, in quotation marks, you're choosing this life that's ultimately is going to make it even more difficult for you. So that's why I usually see it as we're not as accepting as our own people when that's not the truth. What it really is just I'm so sorry and so angry that you have to now work 10 times as harder just to get half of what they have out there. And that's what it's taught because it's just like, and that's what you'll usually hear like, now you got another strike against you.
Right.
It's like it's
Yeah, that
not
makes
being
sense.
a person of color is hard enough. Now you're queer. Now you're straight. But now you're transgender. That's more harsher than just being a regular queer person. Because at the end of the day, you can hide being queer. Like it's just who you are ending up with at the end of the day. But when you're being transgender, there's no hiding from that. Especially when you're going through that period of your transition, if you choose to medically transition within yourself, or if you choose to be non-binary, then it's just like now you added that strike against you. Now look what you're doing with your life. And that's like every parent who is upset. So they're upset in that respect and not actually of just like, I don't accept this, it's not it. Like, of course, there's still religion too in that field, but it's more of an anger, upsetness that now this life is harder.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense.
One of the things that John and I talk about on a regular basis is legacy financial exclusion. And this is where, as queer folks, oftentimes we don't get the benefit from, you talked about it earlier when you talked about financial education, right? You don't have the parent there or the somebody telling you don't use this credit card or this is how you use money or those kinds of, but we take it a little bit further in the idea, well, you even mentioned like getting that support, financial support for getting your first apartment or getting your first car, those kind of things. And we see that as queer people, we are more likely to be left out of those kinds of financial benefits than our straight counterparts, than our straight peers. And so I'm curious if there is an almost natural financial exclusion that happens to queer people of color because their families themselves are not at a financial level that maybe white people are at a financial level that their parents might be. And you just pointed out, it's just an additional strike. This is one more strike against you and it seems like the more strikes, the more likely that you have these kinds of legacy financial exclusions happening in your life.
Yeah, so it's how can I put this one? It's just that it's like families have it, but it's just that they don't. One, a lot of people do not understand what being transgender is. And then also, when you transition, even ourselves as transgender people, we don't realize that our family has to transition as well too. And then that comes in more complications as well. Just like it's more expensive to transition. So it's just like even if you do have supportive family members that want to help you, they're just not in a position to do so because now your gender affirming surgery can cost you upwards of 10K and up. And it's just like, I just don't have that right now.
Yeah.
So it's just seeing those different discrepancies, I would say, within the family and the transgender community has happened a lot more. But then, especially just being a person of color, it's trying to understand why is it costing so much more.
Mhm.
And then we're thankful now that more insurance companies are being more accepting to gender affirming care. So even if you are on Medicaid on the other spectrum, that is taken care of. So it's just like that's a ease and a burden off of your family members to do so.
Sure. It's like with Brian from, I forget his last name suddenly, from Modern Husbands, when he was on the show. He coaches a lot of families who have transgender children, helps them with their finances. And he said, one of the things that people don't talk about is that it's not just the person who's the transgender person who's transitioning. The whole family
Yeah.
has to transition, and sometimes nobody, they don't. There's not a lot of resources and education out there to help them do that easily. So unfortunately, everybody's got to kind of do it their own way the first time, which is very often ugly until they kind of figure things out.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And then just lastly, I will say too, like there is the discrepancy when you are a person of color and you're trans versus like you are trying to excel and get out there. It's just like it's so much harder sometimes too. And it's just a discrimination that you face because like we're starting to see a trend on social media in the transgender community that like you can say like you can be a person who's not of color, you can say one topic and it can go viral. But if you're a person of color and you're saying the same topic, it just stands there. And it's just like you're waiting for somebody else to say the same thing. And you're just like, wait, what happened? I said that like 3 months ago. And now you're like applauding this one person. And now we're starting to see it in the nonprofit sector of fundraising too. So it's just like you have some transgender communities that do not even have a person of color on the board, but they're getting millions of dollars on there. And then you have others that are people of color doing the same exact thing. And it's just like they're barely hitting that $1,000, $100,000 mark. And it's just like, I want people to pay attention to like where they're putting their dollars are because it's like you can always support both. Like there's no reason of like just supporting one versus the other because you didn't see where it came from first of all. So
Right.
It goes back to that whole idea of financial empowerment comes from us within the community, right?
yes,
As a
support
community,
us.
we have so much financial capabilities. If we were to stop and take a moment and think about it, the way in which we could just use 1% of our money could change this world completely. So
Completely.
I want to kind of scratch an itch that John and I have about data as
Okay.
folks, for those of you who aren't watching, I'm actually scratching my back right now as I ask this question. But one of the things that we have noticed when it comes to the data that gets pulled on the community overall, the LGBT community, not just the trans community, but I think it might even be a little bit more I don't know the right word to use.
Prevalent, exacerbated.
Yeah, I was going to say that, but I don't
More.
know if that's exactly the right word to use. But I'm oftentimes wonder if the fact that the LGBT community skews younger ends up affecting the data. You know, for example, in the study that you shared with us, the 2022 U.S. Was it the U.S. Trans Survey? 43% of the respondents to that survey were aged 18 to 24, but 12% of the U.S. population is aged 18 to 24. So when we compare this group we compare this data to the general population, I'm wondering, are we actually comparing the right kind of information? And do you think that has an impact on when we see things like net worth or levels of poverty or education levels, things like that? Do you think that kind of has an impact, and should we be aware of that?
Well, I would say definitely for myself, like being a data scientist self of like researching data and finding different data sets, is always one how the data is getting out to people in order to take that data and then be the representative of the sample or be a representative of the group. So it's just so much easier now with social media and email and internet that take a survey. Well, it needs to be phone accessible. But who's always on their phone? That group of 18 to 24, compared to
Right.
people who are not
Scrolling
on
through
their
TikTok.
phone. Exactly, scrolling through Instagram. Hey, take the survey, or like, hey, I'm doing the study. Can you take the survey? Compared to like, it's not like the census how it used to be. Somebody's knocking on your door or mailing you out the forms, and it's just that I would say one having that grace to understand like people are finally starting to care about us, even LGBTQ as a whole, to say like, hey, even from the financial perspective, like for example, Prudential, like I started seeing them actually take a liking to us to actually care about our financial situation to say like, hey, this is the data of what I seen. But how many years ago was that when they started that? Recently, just like, and that's just for the whole LGBTQ. So now we're going to like the transgender population, that somebody actually cares and wants to include us, and that we have to take this on our own to make these surveys and get them out there to understand that, hey, I feel like this is the representative group because they're the representative group that's actually speaking up and saying like, hey, because also another thing too in the transgender community, it is rare to see your elders, to see older examples of transgender people, and not even like if they're thriving or not, but just to see them and to be visible and to say like, hey, I've been in your shoes, I transitioned at this time, I faced this and going from there. But they're more likely not able to see like where this survey is coming out or how to find that older demographic to give you a real true sample and a representation of what it is. So I'll just say like, since we're all in the baby steps sector right now, I feel like as more people are participating, the impact will change as we continue on, because now there's like Sage that's there for transgender elders and LGBTQ elders that are actually caring. Because let's be real about it, especially in the queer community, when you get to retirement, not many people are there, or it's just like older white gay males who like made it there. But then what about the lesbians? Then like what about trans? So it's just like, what about all the other people in there? So that's how I feel about that. And that's the data that's out there, because like to find that data, I had to search hard too to get that for you so we can have this conversation.
Yeah, the data. That was why we begged company after company after company for years. Please do a study with us, please. And
Yes.
thankfully, Motley Fool finally stepped up and said, "Yes, let's do this. We want to try to do this survey." And we said, "But you must agree to us that we will include all of the community, not just the L's
Yes.
and the G's, if we're going to do this." So, no, I really appreciate your point here that. There are a lot of silent or missing elders in the LGBT community for a variety of reasons. We know that
Hmm.
some of that is because those individuals died because of the HIV/AIDS crisis. We know
Yes.
that some
Yes.
people, unfortunately, took themselves out. And then
Yes.
there are some people who have gone back into the closet because just for whatever their reason, and I'm not going to
Hmm.
judge them for doing that, for whatever reason, they have gone back in the closet. So they're just not, those voices are not there. But let's talk about we mentioned earlier this idea of anecdotes and stories and how those stories make things that matter more meaningful. One of the things that we were, I don't want to say shocked by, but we were shocked about how severe it was the number of trans and non-binary folks in this survey that we did with the Motley Fool who said that they had been discriminated against by somebody in the financial services industry.
Yes.
And, it just 74%, right? 74% of trans non-binary folks said that somebody in the financial services industry had discriminated against them. And I'm going to make a point here for folks who are listening. Whether the discrimination actually happens or it's a perceived discrimination, because that happens. There is perceived discrimination. The person may not intentionally or unintentionally be discriminating against us, but the discrimination, the perceived discrimination, is just as detrimental to both the people in those feeling like they're being discriminated against, as well as corporations, knowing that if you knew that you had a population of people who thought that it had been discriminated against you, you would want to know that to try to repair that. What has been some of your personal experience around this idea of discrimination, especially by financial services?
Oh my gosh. Like the biggest story that comes out is like, and it's forever changed my life, is that like I remember when I was just like figuring out who I was, and my dad for some reason had like these mutual funds and he put one in my name. And I just knew like at that time it was big money. I think it was around like $5,000. So to me, like just starting out in college, that's big money.
Yeah.
So I was just like, I really want to do something with this. And I wasn't even thinking about like gender affirming surgeries or stuff like that. But I knew like this seems important. So let me try to be important about it. So I'm thinking I have a good relationship with my financial institution, like, cause I go there, I speak to this guy and I thought he was helping me out and everything like that. So I'm just like, all right, cool. I go there and I was just like, hey, this is a situation. My dad gave me this. Like, what should I be doing with this? And I was like, I feel like maybe I should invest it. I don't know. And he goes like, oh, no. Like, don't worry about investment. Like, you don't need to worry about that. What you need to do is take this 5,000 and put it on a credit card. And me not knowing any better, I did that. And I was just like, okay. And now I'm thinking like, yeah, I'm living big and I have $5,000 credit card. And it's just like, no. I literally took that money out that fund, put it onto a credit card, and then ended up spending it all in like maybe 3 to 4 months. And then I was in deeper debt than I actually started out with. And that's just like a form of discrimination of just like, it may not be blatant discrimination, but you're seeing somebody who's in front of you struggling, doesn't know anything, and you took advantage of this person, aka me. And now I could have kept that in a mutual fund, let it grow, and that could have paid for my whole transition.
Yeah.
But I didn't know. I had no idea, and like that's what it was.
What was the
And
reason for the credit card, though? Did they have a
because
supportive reason?
no, he was just like, it's always good to have a credit card. Like, just have a credit card in your back pocket, because I didn't have credit, and then that's why I didn't realize like they need to put many people on credit cards every month. So he had like no really good reason to have
After we're
to
done
tell me.
recording, I'm
some
gonna
sort of
I'm gonna guess which bank I think it is.
Exactly right.
Open
let's
up
do
as
that.
many accounts as you can.
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
Basically, yes. And I was just like, okay, hadn't, because like nobody else knew. And I just like, I did actually go to other family members. They're just like, never heard of mutual fund. So I was just like, okay, like, let me just go there and that's it. And then also when it comes to like big loans, like trying to get a personal loan, trying to get gender affirming surgery loans, like you are deeply discriminated against. And then this is another thing that happens to the transgender community that's very maddening and it's very upsetting. So when you're transgender and you already have your dead name, and then you file your legal name and then you get your new name, I do not know why, but they give us 2 credit reports, and then that damages us when we want to apply for loans for different things, because they're just like, well, nope, this score's lower. And then you have this one. So why do you have 2? And it's against it. But when a cisgender person gets married and they change their last name, all of a sudden it's merged, it's fine, and your credit score is up. But ours significantly drops. And then we have 2. And then we have to fight the credit bureaus to say, hey, can you merge ours together, or can you at least drop one and put one on the other report? It's like this big uphill battle that we have to go through in order to just have a damn credit report. Like, I
Yeah.
don't get it. And we suffer from it all the time. And that's discriminatory. Like, why does that have to happen to us? And a lot of people did not know this, but that happened to me. And then with my clients, and then picking up the trend. And I literally asked the question out there on social media, like, how many credit reports do you have? Do you have two? And if you legally change your name, and they're like, yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
All the way through. And I was just like, why is nobody doing nothing about this? Now, experience that they're starting to help to like merge them together. But this shit, why is this an issue? I'm
Right.
upset.
You already do it for cis straight people when they get married, so you
Exactly.
can do it for everybody
Why?
else.
Why?
The technology's there.
So when I started out working in financial services, I started working out in operations, and one of the things that I used to do was what they would call registration, which was helping individuals change their names, or when someone had passed away, making sure that the accounts were moved to the right individual's name. And on a regular basis, I don't want to say, it wasn't like every week, but on a somewhat regular basis, I saw name changes that came through for individuals who were changing their name, and it was pretty clear that they were also changing their sex, right? Their sex marker on their accounts. And I'm going to tell you folks, it is so fucking easy. It is so easy. I did it, and it was so easy to make those changes on those accounts. To change the name. Now, I granted one system to another, one financial institution to another, but it's so easy. And I think that there are some companies, some organizations that put some financial, or they put some barriers there or hurdles there just to make it harder.
Yes.
And they don't have to. And I'm talking about, I was doing this in like 1996, 1997,
Oh my
1998.
God.
We're talking about 25, 30
David's
years
up there
ago.
in years.
Yes, I'm an old fuck. But it doesn't have to be hard.
Not at
You
all.
don't have to make it hard. You can make it easy. And do you know how much goodwill you as a company, your company will create within the queer community if you
Yeah.
make. Now, I 100% understand that we have to deal with the Patriot Act, and that we have to know our customer, KYC. We have to know who your customer is, and you have to verify this information. But when you get a legal document that says this person has changed their name, it is not up to you to decide whether or not you're going to make this easy or hard. You do your job, you do what the document says, and you move on. Just like you said, when a person puts their document in front of you that says, I have been married, I've changed my name, my last name, please update it. It's the exact same thing as when somebody wants to change their first and last name, or they're just their first name and their gender marker. It doesn't need to be hard. It's
Just a fancy Excel spreadsheet is all it is.
Sorry,
Wow.
on a little bit of a soapbox there, but
No, you need to be
irritates
on
the
that
heck out of
soapbox.
me.
No, you need to be on that soapbox, because we have people in the community who are getting credit scores that are like bad and all this stuff because of that one thing that can be easily fixed.
Yeah.
That can like shoot your score up.
Yeah, I do appreciate you. You did mention Experian, because I think they now have a dedicated page on their
Yes.
website on what the steps you need to go through to make this a little bit easier for that process. So.
Did that exhaust you?
Yeah.
Preacher.
I'm with you. Yes.
Let's talk about some good things.
Yes.
John and I love when we start to see some of this good data that comes out about the community. And one of the things that we loved was this when you shared this U.S. trans survey with us. 2/3 of individuals in the survey said that they felt that their health was in a good, very good, or excellent state. What are your thoughts on that?
So it's all down to like the gender affirming care, especially for us in the transgender community, because like, to let people understand in the transgender community, like when we are aligned, meaning that like our outside matches our inside, or we are aligned knowing just like how we feel and it matches and we have a name to it, we have a language to it, and we can express it, our mental health like exponentially grows. And we all know like when you have good mental health, your physical health follows with it. So it's just like seeing that, okay, one, I have the language, I know who I am, this is it. And now, like I said, more insurance companies are giving us gender affirming care. And then more people in the medical field are taking the time out to also do pronouns and say like, okay, like, hey, what's your name and pronouns? Like that one sentence, especially in the medical field, goes a long way within the transgender community because it lets us know that we can relax and we don't have to do that mental calisthenics to see if we're going to be accepted, if we're going to be discriminated against, if it's going to be like a shitty ordeal, or to know like, oh, this person knows what they're talking about. I can feel some trust. And then it can be like, okay, I know what I need to say. I know I feel safe and I can do what I need to do to get here. And I can feel comfortable in this stuff that just brightens up our mental health, our emotional health, and it just follows through. And it's just like one sentence, like, what's your name and pronouns? Like, yeah, how simple is that? So it's amazing to see that, especially in our community, starting to see the medical field brighten up for us and make those changes. And especially in medical school, they're making strides. I didn't know this too. So I have friends in medical school who are like, oh, there's like LGBT section or like there's LGBT workshop coming in to say like, hey, what's your name and pronouns, or this is how you work with a transgender patient, or even the clinics within itself. And you're just like, wow, okay, like they're getting it to them early now. So
It reminds me of when we were in West Virginia. We gave a talk a couple of years ago there, and we met an LGBT organization. I can't remember what they called themselves. But anyway, they had to hold this whole campaign with the local police and firefighters and EMTs and all that, where they would wear a specific pin that the county or the region had made that they could put on their lapel somewhere. Or whatever.
yes,
So it was this nonverbal confirmation,
yes,
like I'm an ally. So if we're in a situation where we can't really speak to each other because it's an emergency, if you can see that I'm wearing this pin, it could hopefully alleviate some anxiety for yourself.
yes, 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 yes. And I've seen some few. So I have sickle cell anemia people in now. So I'm usually in and out the hospital sometimes. So seeing that on doctors, it's just like, yes, 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 yes. Thank you. Like, yes, please.
Yeah. It's what all of us want, right? All of us, no matter who we
Yes.
are, what our gender is, our age, no matter what, we all just want that. I don't know if the word is respect, but it's just the
Yeah.
honor of being a human being and being treated like a human
They
being,
just
right?
want validation.
Yeah.
Like I'm just a
Yeah.
human, just
Yes,
like you are.
exactly.
Yeah.
I feel like it's both. I feel like it's respect and validation. And
Yeah.
that's what we want in the transgender community. It's not even like what we want, but now it's like what we demand. Like
Yeah.
respect and validation. Like we're past what we want now. It's like what do like we're drawing the line in the sand. Like this is what we demand because we give it to you, give it to us.
Okay, one more question on the positive notes here. The survey that we did found in 2023 and in 2022 and in 2023 that the number of trans individuals who are earning $100,000 a year or higher was larger than the general population. What are your thoughts on that? That just seems it kind of, I think sometimes like goes against the narrative that we hear
Yeah.
oftentimes about the community. And what are your thoughts? And maybe do you think as maybe some of the reasons why that's happening?
Yeah. So I first of all, I'm just so proud to hear that because it's amazing. It's good to hear and know that they're out there because it's just like I said before, somebody gave us that shot to let us shine because being transgender is just one of our identities. It's not who we are as a whole. It
Yeah.
just lets you know that, okay, I do not agree with who I was when I was born. And now this is who I am and always was. And now it's just like, all right, that's one side of me. Like everybody else has different sides. Just like being gay is not the only thing that you are. We are highly intelligent people as well. We have goals, we have dreams, we have aspirations. And I'm just thankful that nobody was gatekeeping at those points, or even if they were gatekeeping, they found loopholes or they went around those obstacles and adversity and got to achieve their goal. And being transgender, I always say it's not for the faint of heart. And so it's just like because you will face a lot of opposition, but you have to know that like that comes with the territory. and it doesn't define who you are, but you're going to keep pushing. So seeing that, I'm not surprised at the end of the day, because like to manage a transition takes a lot of effort. To manage going through that in your life and still handling other parts of your life that are more complex and more difficult, because often by not, you have to be on that journey alone sometimes. And sometimes, especially in the community, you do wonder, like, did I make the right decision? Should I like detransition? Like all that stuff is real and valid. But when you push forward and you're like, no, this is what I want, this is what I'm going to achieve, I'm going to be the first in this situation, I'm going to be the first in many situations, hell yeah, go for it. And so I'm happy that that's happening. And what I think about it is just like how they got there too is one, that knowing what they wanted within their education, two, not letting adversity get to them, and then three, just knocking it out the park to know like, okay, if, because especially in the transgender community, we do things not only for ourselves but for others. So we always say like, you know what, if I'm going to be out and I'm going to do this, I'm going to kick open that door and let other people come through. And so it's just like, I'm not always going to be the first and stop there. I'm going to be the first and I can show you what you can get and what you're able to do, because you're going to inspire that next generation to take the baton and go even further.
Right on. I
Do
love
you,
that.
do you think this speaks to the the possibility that we're seeing individuals who are slightly older, people who are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, who are starting to come out as trans because they finally feel comfortable or safe, and that we're getting to a place where the world is a little bit a safer place for them to transition later in life? And maybe the next generation is the older generation, is looking at all these young folks who are transitioning and saying, well, if they could do it, I guess I can do it too.
Yeah. So we have this thing in like the trans community. It's just that like, it doesn't really matter what age you are when you transition. Because, for example, I transitioned for 13 years. And like you said, somebody who just came out and decides to transition, it's kind of like I can be their elder as well, to be like, hey, this is what it looks like. If you want to start this transition, these are some resources. Here you go. And this is what you need to do. But at the end of the day, what we realize within the community is that it's all generational, and what you were at that moment in your life when you found out that you were actually transgender. So that's why you're starting to see a lot of older people in that community, because at that one time, yes, it was not safe whatsoever, especially like if you're growing up being a teenager in the 1950s, 1940s, 1960s, 70s, you had to face bullying, like violent bullying alone at that. So it's just like, it's safer for me to be in this closet and do what I need to do until like you're removed from that situation. Or it's also like the values that were instilled in you at that time as well too, to say like, well, you're not supposed to do that, you're supposed to have a family. And then usually when their family's done and all grown up, then it's just like, I did my part, I did what society expected of me, and now I can live my life for myself and decide to come out. So there's just like so many different reasons of what chooses people to actually come out at those ages. But now just seeing that like it's a different time and generation has been a very huge factor in that part, to let them know like, hey, and lastly too, like, we realize life is too short when you are in the transgender community and you're just like, look, it's too emotional strength that you're just like, I cannot live this life being this person that I not am. That like, you see, I used to always use a metaphor that helped people explain, like when I used to grow up, I used to say mirrors never worked for me, because like that reflection that people would see was not me. And a lot of transgender people feel that way. So it's just like, oh, now I can actually live the life as who I reflect back in that mirror, versus like, I'm not going to stay as that person that's reflected back in that mirror, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
That is brilliant. I've never heard it described like that. And I'll be honest with you. I've never really asked any trans person this question. I guess because maybe a little bit of fear. But I know what it's like to be a gay man. and to grow up gay, but I have no clue what it's like to be a lesbian or what it's like to be non-binary or trans or anything like that. And the way you just described that is just like, boom, light bulb went off in my head of looking in the mirror and seeing somebody that's not you. We've seen that in movies. We've all kind of experienced, I don't know if you want to call it experiencing that nightmare, but we've all kind of, we know what it would feel like if you were to look in a mirror, and you would be kind of freaked out if you look in a mirror and be like, who the fuck is that person?
Yes.
And to have to experience that on a daily basis of, that's not the person I am inside. That's just a great explanation. I really, really appreciate it.
And yeah, because like you kind of go crazy sometimes too, because then you have everybody else in the world like, no, I see that thing. And you're just like, no, that's not it. And you're just like, no, I'm telling you, like, that is not it. So it's just like you're fighting against that so much hard too as well, to like be like, no, that mirror metaphor gets people all the time. So I'm happy.
Yeah.
Thankful that
that was brilliant. I loved it. So we want to appreciate your time and the time of our listeners. I've loved this discussion, that we could probably continue this for a while. One of the things that John and I have been doing with our guests recently is asking them about something that makes them feel good or excited about life or about their personal situation. What is something that's really got you excited right now or making you feel really good? And it can be personal. It can be about the community, whatever it is, right? You know, you got to have your favorite ice cream last night. I don't care what it is, right?
Awesome. So thanks to y'all for sending me the Plutus Foundation grant for financial literacy influencers, because I won the grant. So I'm able to
Yes, I love that. So exciting.
Yes, I'm able to start my podcast called Money Fears, where I will have people within the LGBTQ community, where we'll talk about our money fears or our money fuck ups, of like how we got into these situations, workshop them together of what we can do to get out, how to prevent others not to get into that situation. And so we're being more vulnerable, we're being authentic. And at the end of the day, everybody's still learning about financial literacy. And I can put that in another avenue to help people learn more about it. So it doesn't make it so harsh or make it uncomfortable. It's just like, hey, everybody messed it up. So we're in it together. So that's what I love. So I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, that is awesome.
You know about when this will launch? Or is it too early?
Oh, so either July. We're looking at July right now.
Very cool.
We're going to drop it. So be on the lookout for that.
Awesome.
Right on.
Definitely.
Well, this is a great segue to the final question. How can our audiences connect with you online and now your podcast?
Yes. So everything is The Transcapitalist. So you can find me on my website, www.thetranscapitalist.com, Instagram, The Transcapitalist, YouTube videos, The Transcapitalist. Money Fears will be on the YouTube channel series, which is The Transcapitalist. So if you haven't gotten the point, if you type in The Transcapitalist, you will find me #1 in SEO. So thank you, Google. So
Awesome.
Very cool.
Well, this is I've had such a fun time with this interview. Your explanation of things and your anecdotes and your stories have just been perfect for this episode.
We have only gone like through 2/3 of our questions, so we need to have you back to go through the other third.
Exactly.
Yes, I would love to come back, please. This has been amazing.
Yeah. We have. There are several people who have been on multiple times, so we will definitely have you come back. So
yes, I love that. Thank
Kenneth,
you
for being on the show. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for having me. This has been wonderful. And always thank you for the invite and thinking of me.
The mission of Queer Money is to financially empower the LGBTQ plus community. Join us in thanking Capital One for supporting that mission.
Thank you, Kenny, for the great information and insight you shared with us into what the transgender community is dealing with today. Thank you, our listeners and viewers, for joining us for another episode. Get your Queer Money takeaway and resources mentioned in this episode from this week's newsletter.
Then join us this Thursday when we cover the top 10 countries for LGBTQ plus people, and next Tuesday when we revisit our Gay Retirement 101 series. Thank you and have an amazing week.